Hello, I am Katie Holloway and you are listening to Ordinary. I'm here without Mark or Graham today. I've got two special guests who can introduce themselves. Ruth, why don't you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
My name is Ruth. I'm one of the members at Christ Church. I am a retired lady.
Newly.
I've got a son who is a Christian, and he and his wife are also at Christ Church, and they have 3 children aged nearly 13, 11 and nearly 9.
Nice. I think this might be our first time having a grandma on Ordinary, actually.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, so thank you. And Charlie, say hello.
Hello, I am Charlie, also a member of Christ Church, married to Nathan with 2 girls, April and Eliza. What do? I am a mum most of the time. I'm an
all of the time, surely.
All of the time, actually. I don't feel like I'm mumming when they're not here, but I suppose, anyway, we'll come on to those things later. I am an occupational therapist and I run a kids' clothing business as well. So I'm a sewist. I never know the word. Sewist, sewer.
Sewer is a bit too much like sewer, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. It never sounds that good.
Seamstress, that's the one, yeah.
I do like, but that's like pure skill. I'd say I'm not like at a seamstress level. That's why I like sewist. It's like a bit of an artist with some material.
Yeah, nice. A cloth artist.
Yeah, I'm a cloth artist. So there we go.
Yeah, that sounds a bit strange. Lovely to have you both on. Thank you for being willing. Today, listeners, if you listened to last week's episode about loosely biblical manhood, the challenges of living as a man as the Bible calls us to, today's kind of a counterpoint to that with the women. So we're all female today. I'm going to be talking about some of the challenges of living as a woman as the Bible calls us to. So if you haven't listened to the manhood episode, either before or after this, do go and listen to it, whether you're a man or a woman, because it's going to be really helpful to everybody, I think. It was a really good episode. I found it helpful as a woman. And if you're a man about to switch off this episode, also do listen to this, because we hope and pray it's going to be really useful for everybody of both genders. So shall we kick off? Shall we go into it? Maybe as an initial question then, what things does the Bible call us to do as women, or not necessarily to do, but to be? What does it call us to as women specifically that's different to what the Bible speaks about as things for men? Ruth, do you want to kick us off?
Oh, I was going to say for Charlie to kick us off.
Wait, Charlie to kick us off then, go on.
No, go for it, Ruth.
I think it's difficult to sort of put it in a nutshell, really, I think, because it's such a wide thing, living as a woman. I think, for me, when I was looking at it, I was thinking about all the things that it's not, because I think that's what we often get sort of put at us. Oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do everything else. I think above all, men or women, we are made in God's image, and we're here to love and serve him. I think when you start looking in some ways as how it is for a woman, you automatically go to the wife and mother role, but it is so much more than that, isn't it? It's not just being a wife and mother, it is living for God, living for Christ in an alien world.
Yeah, when I was thinking about it, it had brought all those Bible women who, lots of them weren't mothers and wives, and there's lots of kind of images of and roles that they have within that. Like Deborah and Rahab, and like Esther was a wife. We're doing Esther at the minute in church. I mean, yes, she was a wife, but a king's wife in a very weird world, but there was lots about her, her role and stuff as a woman, and Ruth as well. I think the big one for me was, which is always the controversial one, which is submission. I think that's one of the big first things that comes in as a woman. Is kind of quite countercultural. So submission within marriage, but also just within the gender roles that God has set up anyway. So within kind of eldership and leadership, submission within church, and those kind of things as well is a big area for women.
I think we often think of submission as purely a women's thing, but actually those things you just mentioned, it's not, is it? Because women are called to submit. All church members are called to submit to their elders. All Christians are called to submit to Christ.
Yes,
we're all called to submit to our authorities. So but you're right, there's a particular element
there's
women are called to submit that men are not, which we can grapple with.
And then just not called in the same way as well. I think there is loads in the Bible about the role of a mother and a wife, to do with that kind of nurturing, caring, kind of all those sorts of words to do with motherhood, and not specifically as your own children, but with other children, and the kind of characteristics that the Bible describes women as, to do with being more emotional, more empathetic, more expressive in those sorts of ways, rather than physical things. Great.
It doesn't mean that men can't have those sort of traits, nurturing and empathy and all those as well. And I think, we need to move away in some respects from the wife and mother, because otherwise people who aren't wives and mothers, women who aren't wives and mothers, are sort of, a sideline. Well, what is my role? And yet there are so many things about being a woman and being a Christian.
That's really helpful.
It made me think as well, is there the bit in Genesis about Eve being the mother of all
living?
So for that role playing out within church, it just made me think how much as a kid I had benefited as well from other women within church that had mothered me kind of in that role, where that's what I meant earlier about not specifically always with your own children, but I do think there is a character difference in that the tendency of women is more mothering and nurturing. Not saying that men can't do those things, but I just think general stereotypes, that is kind of where it plays out a bit.
I think as well, though, the one thing that I sort of struggled personally with for a long time in church was things like, oh, well, you're a woman, so we'll put you on the crash road, a sort of automatic thing. You're a woman, you do this. Well, actually, the crash rota is not the right place for me. That is not my gifting, and I know that, and it never has been. But the fact that it was assumed without any sort of conversation,
I think it's really important, isn't it, to stay away from stereotypes. We talked about this a bit last week with the men, actually, how it can be really harmful when we stick with these stereotypes. And actually, in my family, it's my husband who loves babies. He would happily go on the crash rota. For me, I mean, controversial, I don't really like babies that much. Doesn't mean I'm not a woman, no. And did I care for my own children well when they were babies? Well, actually, I don't know. They're alive and well today. They're all right. But we maybe need to not have those feelings of guilt if we're not, I'm a woman, I should absolutely love babies. Actually, no, you're called to love and care for people, but it's okay if you
loving and caring for people, it's so broader. Like nurturing our heads, I think, just goes to like a mum and a baby, but like nurturing within a friendship is a massive role that women play to other women.
Absolutely.
Nurturing even like, I don't know, same age, 10 years younger, 20 years younger to people, and that is in lots of people's skill set and really gets overlooked, to do with nurture and those kind of characteristics that women do tend to have a little bit more.
It's definitely really important to disciple younger Christian women. I don't mean younger in years necessarily, but when somebody becomes a Christian, particularly like myself, I mean, I came from a completely non-Christian background, a woman to get alongside me and just help me to understand what had happened in my life maybe, and to point me to, because I had no Bible knowledge or anything like that, that sort of nurturing from an older woman was amazingly helpful.
Yeah, that's really key, and that's another way women nurture, isn't it?
Yeah,
great. So what do you think the challenges are in being a woman today, in today's culture, but particularly in seeking to live as a woman in the way the Bible tells us to, which potentially is different to how the culture around us would see womanhood? What do you think? Maybe Charlie, kick us off.
Oh boy. I think the thing most prevalent to me recently has been the narrative in culture that women can have it all. So there's you can have a wonderful house, you can have a wonderful marriage, you can have a wonderful life, you can have children, you can have a job, and basically you should be able to smash it all, and that is really hard. It's a really hard setup for women, where you're kind of told this narrative of being able to have it, and it really kind of flips on its head what the Bible is saying about how women can love and serve within different roles within that. It kind of made me think about that submission again. Like it's hard to submit to making different choices to men. They don't have to make a choice as giving over their bodies to, say, have a child, or make those choices around, if you're going to adopt, you're going to have to stop work, or they're not as much given those choices. And it's realizing that God has made me a woman for a purpose, to submit to him in making those choices for my gender. And actually it's hard, and I think it's hard to fight against that in the world where you do want to have those good things that God says about being productive and using your creativity and using your skills, but I think you do have to be really wise in when you do those things, and that's where you can learn real patience and kind of just humility, and realizing that I can't have it all. That isn't my choice right now.
So what particularly is the challenge in that? Is it that the challenge of accepting I can't do everything, or is it something else?
I think it is the challenge of accepting that, accepting that you can't have it all, and that I'm not entitled to it all. I'm not entitled to be wonderful at work and be a wonderful mother and do all these things together. That's great if you can do those things, and I did those things for a while and did do those things for a while, and I don't so much at the minute. And it's accepting that it's not my choice and my kind of, not moment to shine, that sounds really lame, but it's not all about me, basically.
Yeah. But you're not saying, just to be really clear, I know you're not saying this, but you're not saying that women can't be mothers and have a career.
I am absolutely not saying that. If those two things go together and they can complement each other beautifully, but I think the narrative of that being how you are seen as a successful woman, that's what I mean, is for me been quite hard in making different choices, where I have put my career on hold as an occupational therapist. I just work on bank. I don't have a full-time job in that. That is a choice that I felt I had to make.
Thanks. Ruth, what do you think about this? What do you think are the challenges of seeking to live as a woman as the Bible calls you to?
I think, first of all, I would say to Charlie and to women of her age, I am so thankful that I am not your age now, because 30, 40 years ago, there wasn't quite this emphasis on you've got to have it all, etc., etc.
And houses are probably cheaper.
Yes, definitely. I think the sort of view of women's roles is very countercultural. But then living, the Christian view of many things is countercultural these days. E.g. things like purity in marriage isn't fashionable and isn't what the world would sort of say. So it is holding the truths of the Bible, I think, for all Christians can be quite challenging. I think, as a woman now and an older woman, I don't have the struggles that younger women do have. But I think, in some ways as well, my views and what I do and say and I have to look at things and say how much of what I think and believe is because I'm a woman? How much is it because I'm a Christian? How much is it just because I'm sort of, a bit older, wiser, and it's really difficult sometimes.
And how much is just you being Ruth?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think the other big pull for women is kind of the whole beauty culture. That's a massive thing to do with kind of you as a part of the sexual revolution. You're a commodity basically, and kind of the whole trans movement as well. It's like it's a thing you can do on the outside to do with being a woman. It's become this aesthetic presentation basically of a woman is somebody who has hair and boobs and looks quite nice on the face. Like that's
men are all three of those.
Well, so I think it's just taken away from the other roles to do with being a woman as well, which is just really hard. And it's changed.
It's changed so much. I think society and culture has changed so much recently, and people outside the church, they just do not get submission. That because I'm in charge of my own destiny. But as Christians, we know we're not, and it's about using our life to make an impact for eternity rather than how I look, how I am this time now. And, as far even with bringing up our children as Christian women, our aim is to, when we bring up our children, it's about teaching them the truths of the gospel. It's about, it's not about getting them ready to leave school and leave home, although that's something that is part of it. But our most important thing as women and bringing up children goes is that, you want to do that in a God-honouring way, and you want your children to be saved. Bottom line, that's the most important thing about bringing up children, isn't it? You can have all sorts of lovely ideas that look beautiful and fit in with the other kids at school, but that's not the most important thing we can give them. As women, I think we are uniquely placed because we do tend to have more time with our children than maybe our husbands do.
Before we move on, Ruth, are there you're quite recently retired and your son's grown and you've got grandchildren now. Are there any particular challenges of being a woman in that season of life as opposed to kind of where Charlie and I are at of young school-age kids?
Yeah, sure. There are different differences and difficulties. At the age of 66, I'm not as physically active and as I was at 26. That's just the way it goes. So, if it comes they want to play running around games, I'm probably not the best person to do that. I think as well as a grandmother, you have to have a step back because, you don't call the tune, so to speak. I have to respect my son and his wife and the decisions they make regarding the children and upbringing and all sorts of things. It's their call first and foremost. Yes, particularly if I'm asked, I'll give my opinion. On occasions, I will give my opinion even if I'm not asked. But it is a very, very different role, I think, at this time of life. But there
not
are
really
so
considered that, but that must be such a challenge. I think I would really struggle to hold my tongue.
It is challenging, but I manage that well. But also, I think now not having a paid job, because I was working full time in the last sort of 15 years of my career, although when my son was younger, I worked part time. But now not having that to do, I can do a lot more in other areas of Christian service, some of which are really important as a woman, things like the advocacy work. If there's a woman with a problem, it's much more appropriate at times for another woman to speak with her rather than a man to do that. So there's lots of lots of positive things about being an older woman Christian.
Yeah, great. I look forward to it then. Okay, shall we delve into submission a little bit? Because it feels like the elephant in the room if we don't talk about it. We mentioned a few different ways, I guess, and even Ruth, what you've just shared about kind of submitting to your son, in a sense, or your son and daughter-in-law in their parenting, because you're not the mother of their children. Like, that's another way which presumably your husband would also submit in that way to them.
Yes, definitely.
So it maybe before we delve into it, it's just helpful to highlight that again, that it's not purely women. So what do we mean by submission? What does the Bible call all women to submit to in a way that it doesn't to men? Does the Bible call all women to submit in a way that men are not called to? And then maybe if we look at particularly in marriage, do you have any thoughts on that, Charlie?
Many. So submission, it's basically, being under the will and authority of somebody else. And I think I have really grappled with it over time, because it feels like, it just feels like a really harsh and negative word that gets put within Christian marriage. And in the end, if you take it out of marriage and put it back to Jesus, where it's shown in the most beautiful way, that's where you can see the beauty of submission, where you see numerous times throughout the Bible, Jesus submitting to God the Father's will. And that doesn't show a weakness, which is often what submission is kind of associated with. It doesn't show a mindlessness where you don't think and you don't speak. Jesus and God the Father, they speak, don't they? He's like, take this cup away from me. Now I'm going to do your will. And those things, if you take it back to the original kind of submission and where it's shown in the Bible, it makes it much more beautiful than kind of society sees it in that. I think there's lots of places in the Bible as well where women are called to submit to their husbands, isn't there? So is it in Timothy? I've lost my place now. A bit in Timothy, and I think it's in Ephesians as well. Where we are called to do that as women within marriages. And I think it's about being able to see the benefit in being able to complement each other in that. There is enough in the Bible that says that women and people in general should be able to talk within relationships and those sorts of things. So it isn't about staying quiet and doing what you're told. It's about being able to encourage one another to be more like Jesus. And the way that we do that as wives is to encourage our husbands to lead and to not be overpowering. And it's the struggle where it comes out, isn't it? I know that where I just want control and Nathan to do what I've told him to do because I think that's right, that's where my power struggle and my sin plays out. It was actually a couple of weekends ago where we had an discussion. There was a course of action that I thought that he should take and he didn't. And actually, do you know what? There was reasons on both sides for that, but mainly mine were selfish in the kind of outplaying of what conversations might happen afterwards for me. So it is being able to talk about those things. We had a discussion. Anyway, that was a bit of a random side thing, but I just think it's important that it's not about not talking. It's about being able to express to one another your thoughts and feelings. And then being able to see how together you move forward in that. And hopefully you'll have a lovely husband, whether he's a Christian or not, that's able to listen to you in that, and to hear what you've said and be able to make a decision for both of you together.
So it's not about the husband always getting his way and the wife always giving way to what he wants.
No. I'm sure you've got more experience, Ruth, but it doesn't, in our marriage, it doesn't really play out like that. It feels more natural, like a discussion. Ruth, carry on. I've talked for ages.
I think, when you're looking at submission in marriage to your husband, our husbands, men, are told to love your wife as Christ loved the church. And Christ gave his life for the church. If your husband is loving you in that way, then any decision and all of these things, if he's making that decision in love, even if it's something that you don't agree with, he's doing it for the right reasons. But, you know, our roles are different in marriage, but that doesn't mean being unequal, because, you know, we, as husband and wife, we've both got opinions and everything else. And like Charlie said, you know, you talk about things and you think about things, and it's really quite rare in our marriage. We've been married 38 years for Stephen to sort of say, no, this is what's happening, and be completely against what I think. It really does. I can only think maybe twice when that's happened, because we do talk about it, and often, you know, maybe it's that I haven't seen his point of view, or he hasn't seen my point of view. And communication is the most important thing, I think, when it comes to decision making. And at times I've actually thought, I'm glad I don't have to make that decision.
Yeah.
You know, I'm delighted Stephen can do that, because I don't know what I would is the best thing to do.
I found a lot of freedom in it, actually. In just saying, actually, and just stepping and letting my husband take the lead. And think, actually, I can concentrate on other things. I don't have to keep grappling with this. I can just submit it to him, which is quite... I mean, I'm a control freak by nature. I wonder if lots of women are.
Well,
and
it goes back to Eve, doesn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Eve, it's the power struggle right back in the garden. Like, she wants to be in charge. And I think you can... I think as women we do. I think it's a very common women's trait.
I've heard it said, I can't remember if Mark said it last week on Ordinary, or if it was a different podcast I was listening to, that at the fall, Adam steps back and Eve steps up. Was that...
No, I think that was Mark last week.
Was it Mark? Yeah. Sorry for not attributing that to you, Mark.
Definitely.
And actually, that does sum it up quite well. Like, I need to step back to allow my husband to step forward, and in that there is so much freedom for me to do other things. Like, it's quite restful, actually. What about single women then, who either have never been married or were married and now are not married through divorce, being widowed, any of that, or women who might get married one day? Do they have to submit to men? How does that work? Ruth,
well, they
nominate you.
They don't have to submit to men in general. The postman or the bus driver. Well,
I've read things where it says that all women should submit to all men. As a woman, I should take my post from my postman in a submissive way.
I don't think that's
really rubbed me up the wrong way. But then I thought, actually, I don't think that's even biblical.
No, I don't think it's biblical. No, it's all of the context to do with submission, as a wife.
Yeah.
And then the other parts of submission is to do with within the church to Christ.
And that's where the single, for whatever reason, woman will be submitting. It will be in church to the elders, but everybody needs to submit to the rule of the elders in the church. It's not just women.
And as well, like, any woman as well, kind of, if you're in maybe a ladies group, whatever, if that's in the week or at the weekend, or just within a group, you'll be submitting at times to the leadership that's in charge there. That's not always men, that can be men, and it can be women. And I think as well, like, take submission out of the church. It happens in, like, places all over all over the world, and kind of different contexts within work and life, and you do live submission out in a different way when you're single as well. It's just,
you submit. I submit to employers or people I'm working for. If I meet a deadline, if I work to a deadline that somebody else sets, when I submit to my kids' school, when I aim to get them there on time. Don't always. No, usually. There's all kinds of ways, all kinds of people submit. Maybe we don't. We maybe have villainized the word.
Yeah, I think it has. Yeah.
Maybe. Okay, moving on a little bit then, and we're going to run out of time rapidly. Time flies when you're having fun. Those of us who are involved in bringing up children, either our own children or helping other people's children, or just in a wider church context, or leading children's work within a church, how can we set good examples, do you think, of what manhood and womanhood look like? How can I live out being a woman in a way that teaches them how it's different to be a woman? Because I don't think they're going to get that from school or the media or anything. So I guess it is important to teach children about women and men being different fundamentally, not just biologically. How can we do that, do you think?
I think it's really important that we do, and I think we do it by conversation a lot of the time, to do with what they think men and women can do. Even already, Eliza, who's 5, has talked about kind of jobs that men and women have, and that maybe it's come from me, but maybe it hasn't. As in, they have from a very young age. You see what men and women do in general.
My son believes that women don't drive because I don't drive, and I've had to say, no, that's not all women, that's just me, and actually look at all these women who do.
And sometimes to like express the struggle that there is in that, just in being a man and a woman and the things that come with that. My lovely girls will know about, the monthly cycle of a woman and how daddy doesn't have that. And, there's those things that open then an opportunity about how you are different. And also we serve together and differently within church. So like we're both on the music team together as a man and a woman. But then we do different things as well. So Nathan is on the eldership, and I lead the ladies' Bible study. So I think it's being able to show that you can have your love for Jesus just plays out in different ways, doesn't it? To do with both of us, loving and teaching the Bible in different ways and expressing our kind of creativity in worship.
What do you think about that, Ruth, having graduated from bringing up your son?
I think it depends what sort of age children they are. I'm sort of thinking particularly of my oldest grandson now. Communication, they will say, or he says really quite outrageous things at times, not that he's thinking but that he's heard, and he just wants to discuss it, and is this right, what do you think? And so I think that's really important to, like with Eliza at 5 and Jaden at 13, they're different conversations that you're having. But I think, being quite clear, having conversations, being open, and certainly not, shutting a child down if they want to ask something to do with men, women, gender, and all those sorts of things. And I think just, within our homes, to just model the pattern of husband, wife, and, kids are very perceptive, and they do see that there is a difference.
I do think as well, God's really blessed us in church with a real diversity within church to do with married people with kids, people that are single for whatever reason, different ages. And so really valuing kind of spending time with different categories, if you like, of people within your church family, because actually you can see single women living out womanly life in a very different way to that they can see me living it out, because they see me in a specific role, if that makes sense. And just valuing the way that especially older ladies in my life have been able to encourage and input into my life at different points, and that happens because of the church family that God has blessed you with. Just on Sunday morning when I was looking around, there was just 3 different older single ladies that were talking to two younger women, and then just a younger child as well. And it's just being able to kind of engage in those things where they are playing out and nurturing those younger people in a way that we are called to do, not as a mum. And I just think there's a real beauty in that. And for us being able to get out of the mindset sometimes of just mum and kids is a challenge and really encouraging.
Great.
Yeah.
As we finish then, how can we as women encourage each other in this? That's the first question. How can we as women encourage each other to keep going, seeking to live as godly women?
Ruth?
I think first of all, pray for each other.
Yeah.
I think be interested in each other. And also, if you see somebody and you think, oh, what's going on there? They look like they're struggling, to not sort of think, oh, well, I don't want to say anything. To be bold sometimes in asking somebody, look, I can see something's wrong. What is it? Or just being aware of each other, aware of the struggles we have. Being open, being hospitable, having if somebody turns up on your doorstep and wants coffee and a tissue because they're in tears, that's very encouraging and helping.
And it's a real privilege, actually, if that happens as a woman, to be able to come alongside someone in that situation.
I think being ready to see and notice ways that you're showing God's kind of character and image as a woman. So it made me think about, side note, about if God had only made one gender, the complement that men and women have within a church family, but within life in general. If he'd have only made one, it just wouldn't show the full glory of God's image and his character. And I think that's where I want to be ready to see that in other people, of women just loving Jesus and being able to see him at work because they're showing his character. They're showing it in different ways. They're showing it when they're able to nurture, but they're able to show it when they have real wisdom and insight in God's word, and they're able to show it when they're really succeeding in their job, and they're able to show their intelligence within that, and the brain that God has given them in that, and their creativity and all those other things where you can show them really differently and be ready to give God the glory for that. And maybe the challenges that they face in different ways, to be able to see how God is helping them through those trials, and be able to encourage them in that.
Great. What a lovely note to I love that. What about men then? How can men encourage women to keep going as godly women, or how can men help us to do that? What would you say to that, Charlie?
I think in all areas of life, men can just really encourage women as their sisters. There's lots in the Bible, isn't there, to do with brothers and sisters within church, and just being open and willing to do that. I think another thing, especially within kind of church, is for men to encourage women for everything that they can do within the view that we have for women within church. So over the past few years, there has been more women, say, in the worship team, doing reading, prayer, kind of mission slots, like all those sorts of things as well, for men to be aware that women in general, I think, do need encouragement to have more of a voice there. It's been a long time in church where it's been very men heavy, and it needs a bit of encouragement, I think, from the men as well, and for women to have a voice in that, which is clear throughout the Bible that they do.
I think thinking about how men encourage and deal with women, I always look at and see how Jesus dealt with women. He was loving, he was respectful, he was caring. That is a wonderful picture of how Christian men should be towards women, you know, because the fact that Jesus behaved in that way shows that, you know, it is a pattern for men to follow, and that, you know, women have got a special place in his heart.
Yeah, definitely.
Lovely. Okay, what a lovely image to end on then. As we close, have either of you got any resources you'd like to recommend? Any books that you found particularly helpful, or websites, podcasts, any of that?
Oh,
it's fine.
I just looked at so many places. There's I think all I would say is, as far as resources go, particularly on the internet, be discerning, be wise.
There was some crazy things I looked at.
There are some weird things out there, but I think the thing that I liked the most when I was just looking, there's a t-shirt company, and there's a t-shirt, and the picture is a skull with this great nail going through it and saying, "Be like Jael, she nailed it."
Okay, well,
look at Judges 4 and 5 for that.
Well,
wowzers. I didn't get
an example of a strong woman. I'm not sure I want to wear that on a t-shirt.
No, I didn't buy one.
Okay.
No, book that I did have a look through though was Disciplines of a Godly Woman. I think it is by Barbara Hughes. It's a bit dated, but actually, do you know what? The principles throughout are really good and helpful.
Yeah.
Women of all ages, stages of life. I found that quite helpful.
I recently read, I just finished it a few days ago actually, Elizabeth Elliot's Let Me Be a Woman, which was written as letters to her daughter. I can't remember when, decades ago. So it is quite dated. And some of this advice to her daughter as a woman really rubbed me up the wrong way. And I was like, oh, but then I thought, no, that's my pride actually. And I saw some of it, I think it is a bit dated, but lots of it, I think actually, no, this is a biblical principle that I am still resisting. So that's a helpful one. It's mostly geared towards married women, or because her daughter's about to be married as she's writing these letters. But there is lots also about singleness in it as well.
What's the other one we've read, Katie? Is it called Worthy? I've just remembered. Yeah, that's about the role of women, isn't it?
Within the church, yeah. And it was helpful,
within the church, yeah. That was really helpful, though. It's a bit, what's the word? Controversial.
I found it a bit forceful.
Yeah.
Although I didn't disagree with anything they said. But
no, it was a bit shouty, though.
Yes, that's how I would describe it, yeah.
But just if you wanted another view on
who wrote that one? I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember.
We recommended it before.
Have you?
We put it in the show notes.
Worthy it's called.
Yeah. Thank you both for coming on and being special guests.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you next time.